everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome to today's video, which is so exciting because it's my September reading wrap up, but also it is actually the first day of October that I'm filming this, so I thought I would do some fall book recommendations for you guys. Books that just scream fall, they're fall coded, or I just feel like they must be read in the fall time. Fall is like my reading Olympics. I feel like that is the season where I read the most books. Sit down, get comfy, relax, grab a drink, grab a snack, because we are just going to be yapping about a lot of books. Let's first start off with what I read in September. I read 8 books, which is pretty average for me. I do feel like it was a bit of an iffy reading month for me, so I'm really hoping that October is better. Starting off with what I read most recently, I finished People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young a few days ago, and you guys, this was just not it. Basically, I went into this blind, and I didn't really know kind of what I was getting myself into. I have read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young, so I was assuming it would be the same type of heartfelt, heartwarming love story, a lot of romance, a lot of deeper meanings. Just simply was not that. And I don't know if it was my fault because I did go into it blind and I didn't really read the back. I'm gonna keep it 100. I definitely did not enjoy this. I gave this 2 stars. We're following Milo and Prue, and Milo's siblings recently just moved to this town to open up this brewery, and Milo is there to basically help them out. And Prue has lived in this town her whole life. Her dad owns like a grocery store and a gas station, and so she helps them with the family business. Her mom is Alzheimer's, so she's also one of the caretakers of her mother, but you know, she's kind of going downhill, and so her dad is kind of teetering on this idea of maybe putting her into a facility and also doing that so that Prue can have a little bit more of a life. She doesn't get out, she doesn't have many friends, she doesn't do much because she just feels a lot of pressure and weight on her to carry out this family business and help her mom. And so Milo and Prue obviously meet. Milo is a very experienced guy. He's kind of like a playboy, and he doesn't really have much experience with relationships because he only does things that are strictly casual. And so Prue is that way in the fact that she also has not been in relationships, but she's done that for a reason, and she's kind of like holding herself to these certain expectations. I feel like right out of the gate we have this like playboy versus like inexperienced woman trope, and that's just normally not my thing, and so they kind of rubbed me the wrong way in the beginning. But I feel like there could be a redemption arc in that if Milo, you know, changes his ways, or maybe he's set up as this arrogant, cocky person but isn't actually that way. But he actually is that way, and I feel like the entire plot really got lost once he basically becomes like her teacher. The rest of the plot with like her family and what's going on with like his childhood trauma that we kind of start as like a setup kind of just completely disappears once they start their romantic relationship, which by the way feels extremely just physical and not sensual and like based in other things other than like physical attraction. Those are my thoughts on People Watching. I am very, very disappointed in this one, but the cover is cute, so you know, that's really the only thing it has going for it. I read Intermezzo by Sally Rooney this month, which I've been meaning to get to for a while now since I read Normal People. I've always wanted to read another Sally Rooney book, but I wasn't sure which one I was gonna go for. I was either this one or For World, Where Are You? But this one, the plot of everything sounded a little more intriguing to me. Basically, we're following these 2 brothers and their journey through grief. They just lost their dad, and they have a very big like age gap between them, and so they're both dealing with grief very differently. They both have very different personalities. You kind of see them trying to rekindle their relationship, but there is a lot of like past issues there that they have to really deal with, and so you're following both Peter and Ivan's POV. It is so genius how Sally Rooney writes, because you can distinctly see the difference in personality between Peter and Ivan's chapters. Like Peter's chapters are just straight stream of consciousness, balls to the wall. You feel like you're literally having a stroke when you're reading it because he is just all over the place. And then you're reading Ivan's chapters, and Ivan has a lot of social anxiety. He very much overthinks everything, and so I saw a lot of myself in him when I was reading his chapters. I really liked the first little bit of this book. It took me a little while to get into, but I was enjoying it, and then it really started to fall off for me because honestly, I am not a literary fiction girly at heart, but there has to be some sort of like subplot of something else in the literary fiction books for me to like it. Like for example, like a subplot of mystery or a subplot of romance, and you really don't get much of that. Like there's a little tiny little bit of romance in here, but I didn't really like fall in love with their relationships. That's why I feel like it didn't really feel like romance to me. You're basically just like, there's no plot. You're following these people, and so you really have to like that type of a book to like this. I can see why so many people love Sally Rooney, but I don't think that she is an author for me. So now that I've read 2 books by her, I think I'll be good, or maybe, you know, depending on what other book she comes out with, if it sounds super intriguing, I might read it. By no means am I saying this is a bad book. I still rated this 3 stars. It's just, I think I think I'm done with Sally Rooney for now. It's just not for me. I also read Catabasis by R.F. Kuang this month, which I was super excited about because this is her newest release. I think it came out in August, so I waited like a little bit to read it. I watched a lot of reviews and did a lot of research into this before I went into it, which I'm really glad that I did, because if I did not, I really think that I would have disliked this. I liked this book. I don't think that this book, again, like the last two books, like I feel like I'm just, you know, bashing books, and it probably makes it seem like I don't like any books, but the last three books that I've read just really have not been my thing. Alice and Peter are two Cambridge students that study magic, and their professor, Jacob Grimes, ends up dying in this freak magic accident, and so they want to journey to hell to basically revive him or reincarnate him so that he can write a recommendation letter for them. So there's a lot of satire in this book, because like obviously that sounds like the most like outlandish plotline and setup, but I think it's a play on like what you would do for success and how much pressure you feel as a student to do great and be great. This book is literally like Alice in Wonderland, The Atlas Six, and Babel if it had a baby. Parts of this I really enjoyed. I feel like once we kept going through court after court after court, it got a little bit repetitive for me. This is the definition of academia. Like I was looking up words left and right, felt like I wasn't understanding anything, and so then I kind of just like gave up, and I was like, you know what, I just will be okay with what I do not know, and that's when I started to enjoy this more. But then we just got to the last half, and I just felt like I wanted it to be over. You know, it's a solid 3-star read for me. That's it. I also read I Was Feeling Epic by Samantha Highfill. This is a oral history of the Vampire Diaries. It goes through the very beginning of like the creation of the Vampire Diaries, the TV show, how they casted all the characters, why they casted certain characters. It goes through like the interviewing process, and then it goes through all the seasons. So like the making of season 1, like trial and error of certain things, the finales. I thought this was so cool and interesting. I have never had more fun with a book. I didn't give this a rating because like honestly I feel like if I did give this a rating, I'd rate it 5 stars. Like there really was nothing I'd change about it. It's basically like a series of interviews from all the cast of characters, the producers, like everything. These interviews I believe are actually pretty recent. To make this book, she did a lot of like present day Zoom interviews and like sit downs with all of these people. So I thought this was just the coolest concept. I would love for them to come out with more books like this for like my favorite TV shows. I just think that's the coolest thing. Of the Vampire Diaries, definitely check this one out. I wasn't like an absolute die hard of the Vampire Diaries, but I did really enjoy that TV show, and I really enjoyed this book. Finally got to The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I've been meaning to get to this for a while now, but I was waiting until the mood was right, because this is a romance with like magical realism, and magical realism is my thing. I love magical realism, especially with a subplot of romance, and so I knew I was really going to enjoy this. We have the Farrow women, and they are like witches. They possess magic, but there is a curse on their family. The curse starts to take effect when they start to like lose their memories. They start to hallucinate. June's mom disappeared when she was really little, and so her grandmother actually like pretty much raises her. Her grandmother has left like a series of clues for June to basically figure out why her mom disappeared, if she's alive, like what's going on with that whole situation. I don't really want to say more than that because there's a lot of things that go on in this book that I was not expecting. It's not on the back of the book. It really took me by surprise, and so I think it's really fun to go into this knowing like not too much about it. It does have this magical realism element to it. We travel like back and forth in time, and there is romance. 4 stars. There were parts of this that I felt a little bit bored, so that's why it's not a 5-star for me. Like it just felt a little bit slow in some areas, but the actual plot and what was going on and the characters and everything, like I really loved. And just like the atmosphere of this book, like really magical realism is going to do it for me every time. My only thriller read for the month, which is really odd for me, was The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. I saw so many mixed reviews about this book before going into it. I thought it was such a unique premise that I was like, okay, I have to read this, but like I don't know if I'm going to like this or not, because I'm seeing some people like absolutely rave about it and other people are like, no. The teenage girl gets kidnapped, and the mom ends up getting a phone call saying that she's a part of the chain, and in order to get her daughter back alive, she has to then go kidnap another child. I actually think like the setup for that and everything could be so freaking cool. It gave me like Black Mirror vibes. But this book is split into 2 parts, and that's where it lost me. I really enjoyed part 1, but part 2 is like nothing like part 1. Part 2 felt like a completely different book, and like not in a good way. And so I feel like if we stuck with the plot of part 1 and we kind of made some more twists and like really built off that initial premise of like this chain effect, I think I would have really liked this. It's very fast-paced, short chapters. There's a lot of potential in this for it to be something great, but it just did not live up to that. I read Wildcard by Elsie Silver. This is the final book in the Rose Hill series. If you don't know what that series is, it's basically like a cowboy romance series where each book follows like a different character. This boyfriend is ex-boyfriend's dad, an age gap trope, which I really did not know how I was gonna feel about that because I've read a few age gaps in my lifetime of reading. They have to really do it well for me to enjoy it. And then also like ex-boyfriend's dad, like that feels really, really icky. But what I will say, it's really not what it seems. Like you hear those tropes and you're like, I don't know about that. But the actual like way that this is done, like I don't want to spoil it, but it doesn't actually feel icky, and their age gap like really isn't that much. I think she's in her late 20s and he's 40. 10 years and you being in your late 20s really isn't like a super crazy age gap in my opinion. The ex-boyfriend's dad trope honestly was done perfectly in this book. I feel like it really couldn't have been done better. There is also one character in this book. His name is Clyde, and he's kind of this like side character who is friends with the main male character Bash. If anything, this book was bumped up a star rating for me because I loved Clyde so much. I did give this 4 stars. I read it in one day. I really enjoyed it. Like I just love Elsie Silver's writing. There's really nothing like it. But the things that like I really did not love was the chemistry between the two love interests, which is like a big part of the book, obviously. So when that's not hitting, like it's not going to be a 5-star read. There's a couple things in here that allude to another series, and I'm like, one of these characters could definitely be a character in the next series. One of these towns they're talking about could be the place of the next series or the setting of the next series. I'm really excited to see what Elsie Silver does next because she's my girl. And then the 8th book that I read, I'm actually going to talk about in my fall book recommendations. So let's get into that. I'm going to split these up into categories. So let's start off with my fall fantasy recommendations. The 8th book that I actually finished in September was the 3rd book in a series. This is the Kindred's Curse series, and the 3rd book is Heat of the Everflame. The 1st book being Spark of the Everflame, and the 2nd book being Glow of the Everflame. I love this series so much. It's actually not completed. I think there's one more book coming out, but I wanted to put these in my fall book recommendations category because I really do think that this is a perfect fall fantasy read. I was so intimidated to go into this series because the 1st book starts off like really short and sweet, and then it gets into chunky books, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. The world building in this is so easy, but it's also super unique. Like it's like nothing I've ever read before, and when I was reading this, I was honestly relating it to how I felt when I was reading ACOTAR for the first time, and I haven't really felt that way about a fantasy in a very long time. We're following the main character DM, whose mother has recently disappeared, and she was actually like a healer for the king. She makes it her mission to basically find out what happened to her mom, and as she's doing that, she finds out a lot of secrets about herself and her family history. And I thought the magic system in this series is so cool and so unique. But once I finished the 1st book, I knew I just had to move on and continue the next 2 because I was absolutely addicted to this. Another fantasy that I would definitely recommend for the fall time is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is another one that is not completed. This is just the 1st book in the series. I'm not sure if it's going to be a duology or if it's more than that, but this book is the epitome of like a fall fantasy. It's very much like a dark Gothic fantasy, and Rachel Gillig does that absolutely perfectly. I don't know how she comes up with her magic systems and her worlds, but they are literally unlike anything that I've ever read, and I don't even really want to tell you too much about it. This was just so good. And there's also a character in here that's probably my favorite character that I've read this year. He's like a gargoyle, like a talking gargoyle. I did not expect this book to be funny, but I was actually laughing out loud when I read this. I had to put The Invisible Life of Addie Laroo on here as a book recommendation. If you haven't read this or you don't know what it's about, we're following the main character Addie, who basically makes a deal with the devil to become immortal, but in exchange, anyone who ever sees her or meets her, as soon as they like walk away from her, they will completely forget her existence. So she makes this deal with the devil, I think in like the 1700s, and it's not until the 1900s or the 2000s that she meets someone who ends up remembering her. And they have this whirlwind of a romance, but then we also have the devil following her, and you see throughout her life the devil checking up on her. I actually really loved the villain in this story. And V.E. Schwab, if you've never read a V.E. Schwab, her writing is so gorgeous, unlike anything I've ever read. The premise of this book really screams fall to me based on like the magical realism element of everything. This is just so good, and it makes me want to reread this again just talking about it. Over the summer, I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, and I fear I will never be the same after reading this. This was one of my favorite fantasy duologies of all time. I did not read the Shadow and Bone trilogy prior to reading this. I've seen some people say that you should. I've seen some people say that You don't have to. What I did is that I actually watched the Shadow and Bone TV show on Netflix, which kind of combines Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone a little bit. I was kind of familiar with the world going into this just by watching the TV show. I think about these characters all the time. They live in my brain rent free. It's a very simple premise. We're basically following this group of outcasts, and their leader is this guy named Kaz Brecker. Don't even get me started on him, but basically they are going on a heist. Not only is the plot and the world building and the magic so freaking cool, the characters in this book absolutely make it. I swear, Kaz Brecker is everything to me. Inej is everything to me. Really fall in love with these characters, and there's only 2 books. They aren't even that chunky. Even in the first, I don't even know, half of Six of Crows, you are already so enveloped in their story. Like, it's very much found family. The fantasy in this book feels very dark. This is a perfect fantasy duology to read in the fall time. And finally, for my fantasy recommendations, we have One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. This is also by Rachel Gillig, like Night and the Moth was. This is a completed duology, the Shepherd King duology, and it is a dark gothic fantasy as well. This is my favorite fantasy duology series book of all time. There's something about this. I've never read a dark gothic fantasy before I read these books. This world is set in this like dark ancient kingdom with this giant castle. The entire town is cloaked in this mist. The female main character has a monster living in her head, and he becomes a very big character in the story. And then there's also these magical playing cards. If you're gonna read one fantasy this fall, let it be this if you have not read it. Moving into like the general fiction, sci-fi, romance, magical realism category. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is one of my favorite books of all time, and I would recommend to read it in the fall because this is a sci-fi thriller, but you are just on an adventure for this entire book. And this also feels a little bit of like a Black Mirror episode. The MMC is like a science professor, but he's very smart. He could have done so many other, you know, crazy things with his degree and with his life, but he chose to start a family and settle down. Without giving too much away, it talks a lot about what would happen if you went down an alternate path in your life. And basically every single decision that you make, it could be the littlest, tiniest decision, will alter the complete path and course of your life. That's all I'm gonna say about this. This is the coolest book I think I've ever read. But then you have to also go on Apple TV and watch the TV show production of this, because Blake Crouch is actually the producer of the TV show, and so the TV show is just, it is absolute perfection. I love Kristen Hanna with all of my heart, and so to only recommend one of her books for the fall time is honestly criminal, but I have to have it be The Great Alone. This is set in Alaska. The atmosphere in this book is perfect for the fall time because it's Alaska, it's the wilderness, it's very remote, and it's in the 1970s, so there are a lot of things going on in the world at that time. Definitely check trigger warnings. There is romance in this book, and the romance is the sweetest thing. I sobbed so many times in this book, so if you're like feeling in a depressed mood, maybe don't read this. But the actual vibe and the atmosphere and everything about this book screams fall to me. I read this, I think this time last year. This book is everything to me. I cannot recommend this enough. Would it be a fall recommendation video if I didn't talk about The Secret History by Donna Tartt? I feel like this book is just talked about over and over again. Like, I would say it's pretty much a classic at this point, and if you have not read it, I don't know what you're doing. It's very academic, it's very dark, it's very twisted. The other thing is that you have a very unreliable narrator, and so it really makes for this like literary illusion going on. But I just remember reading this and like getting to the end and being like absolutely shocked. You're basically following this group of friends during their time in college. Every single one of them are so smart, but they're also like very different, and there's some dark things that this friend group is doing. I'll leave it at that because I think this is such like an interesting book to go into, like not knowing too much about it. I just love feeling smart when I'm reading a book, and this book will like also like make you feel dumb. Once you get it at the end, you'll feel so smart after you read this. I have 2 Ashley Poston books to recommend, The 7-Year Slip and The Dead Romantics. If there's one thing about me, it's that I am an absolute Ashley Poston stan. 7-Year Slip. This is the best book, my like hands down best book I've read ever. Of all time, my favorite book. This is magical realism romance. We have the FMC Clementine, who is staying in her late aunt's apartment, and her aunt has recently passed, so she's going through a lot of grief at this time. And her aunt is also like a very whimsical, magical person who always said that the apartment was enchanted. And shocker, it does, because we do have a magical realism element in this book where this apartment can travel back and forth in time by 7 years. So one day she wakes up and there's a man in her apartment, and this man is like, yeah, your aunt told me I could stay here for the summer. But what she comes to realize is that she's actually 7 years in the past. We're getting past and present timelines in this whirlwind of a romance 7 years in the past, but she's also ends up like meeting this guy in present day. But he's already like lived a lot of life with her that she has not yet experienced, and I just thought that this book was an absolute genius of a book. I've read this 3 times, and in the same breath we also have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This was my first read of hers. I think this is also her debut novel. This one is following the FMC who ends up going back to her hometown for her father's funeral, and her parents actually own a funeral parlor forever pretty much. She's like had this like sixth sense. She's kind of like a medium, and when she goes back to her hometown, a ghost shows up, and it's actually like a man that she knows from her life in the city. Literally, we have a romance with a ghost in this book, and it's not spooky, it's not scary, but like obviously because of that premise, it's perfect to read in the fall time. I think this one is a good place for you to start with an Ashley Poston book because she's come out with multiple books now and they all have a magical realism element to it, but I think this is a great place to start. Last but not least, for my fiction category, I have to recommend Bear Town by Frederick Bachman. This is actually a 3-book series. I'm just holding the first one right now. The second one is called Us Against You, and the third one is The Winners. In this one, we have a really small, deep-rooted forest community. They have nothing to look forward to, and there's nothing going on in this really remote community other than hockey. And they have a really good hockey team. Then there's something very traumatic that happens to one of the girls in the community. It's actually, I think, the hockey team manager's daughter. Definitely check trigger warnings. I don't want to talk about what it actually is because it does give up a little bit of a spoiler, but just know that this traumatic event like really alters the course of the book. A lot of people show their true colors, and you are following the POVs of a lot of people. And one thing about Frederick Bachman is that he will literally change the POV of like who you're in the perspective of, paragraph to paragraph, not chapter to chapter. You really come to love a lot of people. You really come to hate a lot of people. There is a Hulu TV series based on these books, which I actually think they did a pretty good job with. So if you're a person that likes to read books and then watch the adaptation, that is there for you. Okay, last but not least, my horror and thriller category. I have to start off with None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell is just such a great thriller author, but specifically I love this book because it has like this podcasting mixed media element to it. And so I feel like in the fall time when you read thrillers and horrors, you want something like really fast paced. And this is also a book where you really can't trust the narrator. Like, she is very unreliable, and you also have some other unreliable characters. The twist at the end like really got me. Lisa Jewell does come out with thrillers that are a bit darker, but this one is definitely the least dark of a thriller that I have read. The FMC Alex has this podcast, and she ends up like bumping into this other girl named Josie, and little does she know Josie is a bit of a stalker. Obviously Josie like wants to talk about things that are going on in her life, so it's going to make good content for Alex, and Alex agrees to do this podcast with Josie. If you're looking for a Lisa Jewell book that's like not super dark and eerie and you know all of that, this one is a good one. Murder Road by Simone St. James is a thriller that I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but it was so good. The couple in this book is traveling to this town for like either a getaway or like a honeymoon, but basically they have to go on this highway to get to their destination, and when they're driving they end up picking this person up off the side of the road who's not doing well. Like, they are like on the brink of death. They get into the hospital. I think they end up dying, but then they do a little bit of digging and realize that, you know, there are a lot of murders and disappearances that have been happening on this particular highway, and they end up being like murder suspects for this person that they picked up. And so obviously, because they're suspects and they know nothing about this, they're doing more and more digging into like what's actually going on. So they're trying to solve this mystery so that they don't be like blamed for this. And that's where I'll leave the actual premise, because it gets really twisty and really cool, and what ends up like actually happening really shocked me. And I'm a person that I love to try to guess what's going to go on, and I definitely did not guess it in this book. The Last Word by Taylor Adams is one of the coolest thrillers that I've read. I read this in literally one sitting. The FMC in this book, you know, she reads a book, ends up really not liking it. She ends up rating it 1 star. The author of the book sees that she rated this book 1 star, and he is not happy with that. So he ends up like actually stalking this woman. There are so many twists in this book, and what ends up happening at the end again is something that I did not expect. The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark, I think, is a newer release, and again, this is another one that I feel like not many people talk about. The FMC in this book is a ghostwriter, and she gets this email. Basically her next opportunity is actually her father, who is a horror writer, wants her to ghostwrite his final book. But his final book isn't going to be any book. It's going to be a memoir of his life, like a biography of his life, because he was the prime suspect when he was little of the murder of his 2 siblings. He never ends up getting convicted because there's really no strict evidence against him, but a lot of people think that he's the one who ended up doing it. He also has, I think, Alzheimer's, and so his memories are really slipping away. And so when she's trying to write this biography, he's either not really telling the full truth or he doesn't remember, and so he's very unreliable. I just think that this was such a well done thriller where, again, like I really did not know what was going to happen. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It's short chapters. You're getting multiple POVs. And finally, I could not do a fall book recommendation video without talking about at least one Stephen King book, Pet Sematary, because I feel like this is the most beginner friendly, but also one of the scariest that I've read of his. This is definitely a horror book. This family moves into this house that has basically like a pet cemetery in the back, and so these animals come to life and it's paranormal. I also highly recommend the adaptation. So this is another one where you can read this book and then watch the movie. The reason that this family ends up like finding out that there's a pet cemetery or there's like something paranormal going on is their cat gets hit by a car. You know, they end up burying this cat, but then the cat ends up coming back. He's not the same. There's something like a little bit different about him. So those are all the books that I read in September and my fall book recommendations. Let me know if you've read any of those or if there's any specific fall book recommendations you have for me to read. And I'd also love to know what your favorite book that you read in September was. I hope you guys at least got a few fall book recommendations out of this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.